You know, I've been wondering to myself recently about this thing's four-wheel drive system. Is it an all-wheel drive or is it a four-wheel drive? Now, I thought about this for a little bit, and the majority consensus out there seems to think that this is a all-wheel drive, not a four-wheel drive. And for some reason, Toyota put on the side of the door and on the back, full-time four-wheel drive. Toyota did build all-wheel drives in the 90s, like the Carina and things like that, but even they weren't really all-wheel drives. They were more like four-wheel drives. What's the difference? I guess the consensus out there is if it's something like a Subaru Legacy, or I don't know, like a Nissan X-Trail, which I think has low range, then it's a mild four-wheel drive. Something like the Subaru is considered to be an all-wheel drive only, and even things like the Evo or the Skyline GTR are considered to be all-wheel drives, not four-wheel drives, because they don't have low range. But I think that this is a four-wheel drive. I honestly do. And it's not because it's my car and I want it to be a four-wheel drive and that's what I prefer it to be. It's what I genuinely think it is. I've spent quite a bit of time underneath Land Cruisers in my life. Not that they break down, but just doing maintenance and things like that. I've had a few Land Cruisers myself. I've had Mitsubishi Pajeros. I've had a D21 Datsun Navara. It was actually called a Datsun, not a Nissan then. And I've had like an Isuzu Bighorn and things like that. So I'm pretty familiar with four-wheel drives. We have had Subaru Legacies before. I think you call them Outbacks in Australia, and God knows what you call them in North America. So I've spent time underneath all-wheel drives as well. There's a big difference when you look at the underside of a car like this, and all of a sudden you realize that, hey, this is basically a Land Cruiser Prado or even a Toyota Land Cruiser underneath. The only difference is inside the transfer case, it is missing the low range gearing. When you look at the drive shafts on this thing, it is no doubt a four-wheel drive. When you look at the front hubs, if the center caps on the mag wheels were removed, you would see that they are heavy-duty, automatic locking, four-wheel drive hubs. When you look at the front drive shaft on this thing, anyone that spent time under any four-wheel drive would instantly look at it and recognize it as being a four-wheel drive diff, a four-wheel drive shaft for the front CV drive shafts. The rear prop shaft is what you'd expect to find on a heavy-duty four-wheel drive. But if you were to look under something like a Nissan X-Trail or a Honda CR-V with all-wheel drive, and you look at the drive shafts on that and the prop shafts on that, and the diff on that and the CV drive shafts on that, yeah, you're going to tell that that's an all-wheel drive. It's not designed for heavy-duty work. Those drive shafts and those CV axles on the front look like toothpicks when you compare it to what this has. When you look at the transfer case on this thing, I'm sorry, it's windy. Get out of the wind. When you look at the transfer case on this thing, it is almost identical to what you'd find on a Land Cruiser Prado or like a 105 series Toyota Land Cruiser. If I were to put this in the air and blindfold you and then just only show you the transfer case and the gearbox, you might even look at it and tell me that it's from a Land Cruiser 100 series or Land Cruiser 80 series. You can't really tell that there's any difference. The only difference is inside that transfer case, there is no low range gearing. So in my opinion, with my experience, this is undoubtedly a four-wheel drive. It is a full-time four-wheel drive, just like a Land Cruiser, just like a Prado. The only difference is it doesn't have low range gearing. Now, if you have the older model Hiace with a 2.8 litre naturally aspirated diesel, and you have low range gearing, then you have a proper four-wheel drive. The other part of this being a real four-wheel drive is on the later models like this one with the 1KZ engine, the transfer case has what's called a viscous coupling. It basically works like a mechanical center diff lock. If it senses one wheel spinning on an axle, it'll lock that center differential via its viscous coupling and send power to the axle that isn't spinning. So essentially, you'll get a locking center diff. Now, an all-wheel drive would normally rely on something like traction control to get you out of that sticky situation. It wouldn't have something as hefty, well, first and foremost, it wouldn't have anything as hefty as a big old transfer case like this. It might have a transfer case on it, but it might look like something like a Milo tin or a coffee tin compared to the monstrous thing that's underneath this. And secondly, most likely it'll rely on something like traction control to get you out of a sticky situation. Whereas with this, you've got quite a few different things. You've got the big beefy drive shafts, the big CV drive shafts, the huge differentials front and rear, the solid axle rear on this, which you'd find it's basically plucked straight out of a Toyota Hilux Surf. So yeah, this is undoubtedly a four-wheel drive. It is not an all-wheel drive. It is a full-time four-wheel drive, and that is the difference. Thanks for your time. Take care. Bye.